watching MT.
You're listening to the Music Video Guy Podcast.
Okay, September ended months ago, but we certainly have good reason to be waking up in our feels this morning. This is the very first episode of the Music Video Guy Podcast. Whether you're here from my video breakdowns on TikTok and Instagram, or just stumbled upon this randomly, welcome. We are here hitting the ground running with a golden opportunity for the emos of the world. But first, allow me to introduce your resident emo, my co-host, Carla.
Hey, hello. Good morning. It is really good to be here. And, as excited as I am for all of the deep dives that I'm sure we're going to be having here on the podcast, I will admit I am extra excited for our very first guest who is joining us today. But before we give too much away, Maui, do you remember your first encounter with anything emo?
I kind of missed the train on emo, actually, just a bit, because I am older than you. By 2005, I was out of college and moving out of the house. I already went through my messy breakup phase and and starting work as a filmmaker. I was more dipping into hopeful fare, trying to get out of that toxic mentality, So I was more into Regina Spektor's Fidelity, and I was a startup filmmaker. So I was looking at music videos as a training ground and as learning for telling narratives, telling stories. Mm-hmm. So, I was getting into My Chemical Romance's music videos I'm Not Okay, or big theatrical affair like Helena, which I understand represents something of an awakening for you.
Absolutely. Well, you at the time, this was 2006.
Yeah.
While you already had a fully formed frontal lobe,
Enough.
I was an impressionable 14-year-old in first year high school, I believe, or second year high school.
Okay.
Very impressionable. And, and at the time, the getting ready for school routine included switching on your boxy little TV and listening and watching the Mix Daily Top 10. And that was the 10, biggest music videos of that particular point of time. And so I'm getting ready for school and I'm going through what I'm usually used to, which is stuff like your boy bands, your S Club 7, bright, cheery, glossy pop, which is fun and great still in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
But a life-changing moment happened, and I remember this day so clearly. Helena by My Chemical Romance comes on my tiny little screen, and it was a brain chemistry altering moment of my life. Okay? When I tell you,
okay.
Yes, it was a little macabre, it was a little dark, but it was also flamboyant. There was expression of big feelings. There was dancing, and I was never the same. I was never the same after that. It set off a lifelong chain of events, including me braving COVID to go to Vegas for that big emo fest when we were young. It included, an entire life of being surrounded by emo music. And that's why I'm excited for this episode, really.
And we even have visual proof.
Yeah.
If I could just bring it up for a second. There it is.
Oh, goodness. Here it is.
You're the corpse from Helena.
I am Helena.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. There she is. Proudly. Yes. So as you can see, decades down the line, we are still obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And folks, that is why I'm so excited for this episode, because we are spending the next hour with the director of some of your favorite emo music videos. Here with us today is the man behind the music videos for My Chemical Romance's Helena, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Not Okay, Ghost of You, Yellow Card's Ocean Avenue, All American Rejects, Move Along, Green Day's 21 Guns, and the list goes on and on. It's so exciting.
He also brought his cinematic talent to major Hollywood movies. In the film world, you know him for the iconic 500 Days of Summer and the amazing Spider-Man movies, the ones with Andrew Garfield, having directed, all of those. We are speaking, of course, about Marc Webb. Welcome aboard, Marc.
Hey guys, great to be here. I'm glad we could get online across the oceans.
You just heard all of our fangirling just now.
I think it, music videos were, to me, it was interesting. I grew up without MTV, and it wasn't until I got to Los Angeles and I was editing some little thing. I was learning how to edit from a guy on a music video or a music documentary called Hype, and I used the Avid at A&M Records. He was doing some project, and I started using the upstairs Avid. This is back in the 90s, and they had a room full of music of director's reels, which were on 3/4 tapes at the time, and I was like, this is extraordinary. So I would go and watch them on the Avid. I watch all these director reels, which, you got David Fincher, you got Michael Bay, you got Michel Gondry, you got all these, and you could watch them by director. And it was such an education. It was the beginning of my sort of interest in music videos. The emo stuff, I don't really know. When did emo start, do you think? What was the first emo? I mean, is it The Cure? Do you want to go back that far? When do you think emo starts? Well, Carla, clearly it started when she was 14.
Yeah. I'd say there's like a long, slow cross dissolve into it, from from punk. I mean, even as early as punk, it was already starting that trend of a more emotional, not really romantic crooning, ballady stuff, more of
emotion with a little bit of an edge.
Emotion with an edge, like angst, like teenage rebellion. You could trace it to Brit rock. You could trace it to blues, But I guess it just exploded in the 2000s.
It really did. Yeah, it really did. It's funny because I when I was doing those music videos, I think my chem was sort of my first. Where I actually done an AFI video, which I don't think they would consider themselves emo necessarily.
It kind of is in a glammy way.
It's a broad umbrella, I would say.
Yeah,
it's a very inclusive genre, right?
Yeah, Davey has his own opinions on that, I think, but I would defer to him. But there is a kind of, obviously, I think a dark alt rocky kind of foundation, and it was it really, that was what I think it was one of my first music videos, was doing that AFI video, and then. And then I did some other rock stuff, but then it's sort of I wasn't my chem was the first of Ocean Avenue, Brand New, Sick Transit Glory was another video I did that was sort of from that category. But I didn't think of it as a movement at that time, and it was relatively obscure. What was happening on MTV, I think this was in the era of TRL, which is you had the 10 music videos, and all you wanted as a record label or as a band was to get onto TRL, because the music video sort of delivery system at that time was narrowing quite dramatically. Yeah, so you had in the 90s you had MTV playing videos all around. Then it started to do a lot of reality stuff, and there was a narrower and narrower window in which to get your music videos played. And then it started getting to aim very sort of specifically at the teenage audience and TRL. And that was where you could make an impact with the music video. And the labels became really aware of that. But the videos that I was making, which were alt rock videos, didn't often get on TRL. And I think my chem did, but it was my point is it seemed very obscure to me. And only recently have I discovered the kind of real nostalgic appetite for emo. I think that My Chemical Romance, I think, just played Dodger Stadium downtown. I was like, well, this isn't, I didn't realize just how big they still are.
Well,
and they're on a world tour.
Yeah.
Incredible.
To add to that, I mean, on our end, like we watch My Chemical Romance. My Chemical Romance was and still is very big here in the Philippines. You know, like we saw them on all three of the music video channels that we have. Like we had the MTV, we had something called Mix, which is the local, and we had an Asian one, the Channel V, and they were on all. Yeah. They were on all of the channels, all of the venues for music videos.
They really did break through, I think, with Helena in particular. So if I can divert to one of our questions about Helena, I mean, you actually answered our first question about it, or about
you dive straight into it.
Affect not being aware that you were actually at the time, one of the architects for how this whole community would be expressing themselves in a whole different way, right?
Yeah, you really were.
So not long after I'm Not Okay, we get Helena, the breakthrough hit, right? And it was able to cross over to a broader audience. And, I imagine that it was, as you say, you weren't expecting the effect it would have. So what was it like seeing this happening in real time, watching basically the awakening of this whole new community of emos who didn't know that this was something they could be or that they could identify with?
I'm a parent now, and I have it's an interesting perspective to have on how young people absorb culture, right? And because at the time there wasn't the social media, there wasn't the internet quite in the same way there is now. Like I think you could barely stream a video. It was still really reliant on MTV. So it was like getting a sense of what was impactful. The bands had a much stronger sense of that because they were out on the road and their audiences were getting bigger. But I think I only in retrospect, you get a real sense of like what that movement was and how it's still like meaningful to a very specific generation, I think, and I think it because like you say, you use the term awakening. I think, I showed my daughter who's 7, different age, but I showed her Helena one time and she was really interested in the coffin and the death part of it and dying. And I think when you're a young person who's listening to S Club 7 and your life is so cheery and you like, there's a kind of warmth to all the media that's coming at you. Maybe not so much these days because there's so much terrible stuff on Instagram, but like I think it was a entree into more serious emotional experiences that kids were having. Like when you get a little bit older and people start to break your heart or people around you die, or you're becoming aware of these things. And it was a way to explore that and talk about that in a way that felt meaningful and a little bit more authentic.
Yeah.
And it was handing off from like the boy band era and like the NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and stuff were kind of like they'd had their moments, as it were, and this is just another swing of the pendulum. It is interesting to think like when I did like I'm Not Okay was a very inexpensive video, and I got the track in, and our reference point when I heard it, I'd seen maybe the cover art of the record, but they had very little visual sort of packaging yet, and I talked to them, maybe I'd seen some photos, but it was our main point of reference when we talked on the phone was Rushmore, and which had just come out, the Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like goth, it wasn't like overtly emo, but when they come into it and you see Gerard with his hair and and the head
the red makeup.
Yeah, you're like, oh, there is he's loves Bowie. You know what I mean? Like there was a kind of a sensibility that was a little surprising to me given the music. But like I remember in I'm Not Okay, we were talking, there was a little intro to it and I had written something and he's like, I like Fangoria and like these other things. And we just started riffing that evening about how to, how we would open it up. And like, there was a lot of reference points that were very specific to Gerard and Ray and Frank and those guys, about what, that carried on. But the video was really, I thought of it a little bit more as a pop video in terms of its visual cues. And what I mean by that specifically is lighting, because we were at a time I was like, all I wanted to do when I started doing videos was like, I was like, David Fincher is the coolest thing ever. Like Jake Scott with like very sophisticated, moody, dark visuals. And there was such like MTV did not want to play that kind of stuff. They very rarely would play that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna like do that. I'm gonna like shoot this with a kind of more high key frontal lighting, but I want to have an atmosphere. I want to have a vibe. So we use Rushmore as a reference, but then we peppered in or the very specific and authentic version of My Chemical Romance, and that combination became part of their identity. But it was a very poppy video in terms of its lighting and its attitude and its humor. And then it's funny you think about, you described Helena as dark. I think the subject matter is dark, but the way we shot the video is quite crisp and quite clean. We used like very sort of wider lenses that kind of like made the feeling of it a little bit more contrasty, but more, or just a little bit brighter, a little poppier. And that was, I think that helped get it through to like younger audiences.
Crossover.
Yes.
I did want to ask you about that bit, because as you say, it is shot more similarly to a pop video, but something that you see quite a bit in the MyChem videos is, yes, of course, the subject matter is dark and we still have that grittiness to it. But did it feel like a gamble at the time to embrace that flamboyant side of it, the dancing, the bright lights, the drama?
I was a big fan of musicals. I grew up going to musicals, and so like injecting dance always felt natural to me. And like the more theatrical it became, the more, I thought expressive it was, and the more interesting it was to watch. And that's what's fun about dealing with bands versus often dealing with like doing commercials or something like that. Your client is not soap. It's a rock band who wants to perform. And like it felt really fun. And they had no fear about embracing the kind of the dance component of it. And to me, that felt very natural. And that there was a history of that in music videos at the time. Like McGee, who's now a parent at my school. It's so funny to see him. He brought like dancing into rock videos. And so like with Sugar Ray and I think Korn even had some of them, and they're like badass dancers. But it's funny, like it exists. It's very easy. It tends to work really, really well. That video, Helena, I remember it was like I was having a real hard time writing a treatment for it. Like I'm Not Okay had come out and it had done really well. And it was funny. And like I remember I was getting calls from like movie people at that time, like, we want to make a movie out of this. And like I didn't know how to make a movie out of it. It was so kind of like minimal, like what we were doing. But I was kind of in my head about what the treatment could be. And Gerard had talked about his grandma, and I was like, we can't have a grandma in the video. That's not going to feel like right. But he was contemplating death. And I remember the first line of the treatment was, there was a line from Night Court, which is a sitcom in the 80s, which was before you guys were around, I think. But there was a guy who was like, I want to put fun back into funeral. And so I was like, that was the opening cheeseball line. And I was like, okay, it's a funeral, but I don't want it to be like sad and morose, but I want it to be respectful and also, talk about the emotion in a real way. And it just that unlocked it for me. And then I was like, oh, let's put a structure in it. And like, okay, this woman, her eyes pop open at the breakdown, and like I just been imposing the musical structure onto a funeral, onto that ritual. Then it rushed towards completion. It became very clear very quickly at that point.
And it's very interesting, like Gerard is in his own right now, like a filmmaker. He produced like Umbrella Academy, and we could all see the influence that I guess you had on like what he did for the show. So it's like,
well, maybe I have to get Gerard has always been an excellent artist. I think we have to give Gerard a lot of credit for those videos too. Like it was always a really fun collaboration. Like they would had like some references and we would go back and forth and it was it was just fun. I just had so much fun with those guys. And for me as a director, it also, like, as they kind of rose to prominence, I think I have been getting better at finding my own voice as a director and like getting more comfortable with the tools and being on sets and like how quickly I could move and how I could tell stories, which for me at that point, like every label was like, we want a performance video with a twist. So narratives were very difficult to get through the process. But at that point, it was like, I was like, okay, I have to redefine what narrative means in a music video, which typically just meant, like, for me, I was like, there is a structure, like it's a vignette, but there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that was my definition of narrative when it came to the music video form, and that could mean that was also impressionistic. But Gerard had a really deep cinematic catalog or repertoire. And I remember on The Ghost of You, which I really enjoyed making The Ghost of You. We talked about Saving Private Ryan, obviously, but we also talked about the Memphis Belle and the uniforms, and it was like they were willing to embrace and protect the cinematic storytelling that was you always wanted to do in a music video, but the labels and the bands were like, I want to wear a t-shirt and I don't want to look at the camera. These guys would really embrace it. And Gerard was like, yes, we'll act, or I'll act. I'll play a part. Like, Ray's doesn't want to act as much, but like, we'll do a little bit here and there. And like, they really wanted, we're not just comfortable with the visual medium. It was a part of who they were. And it was a part of their identity. And his comic book artistry, which became, graphic novels, and I think the Umbrella Academy too, that was very deeply ingrained in him. And it was, I think, a companion to music for his entire entire career. But that's really, you have to talk to him more specifically about that. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he was so facile with references and just the language. And he was also super trusting. It was a really great collaboration.
We'll try to get him on eventually.
Wouldn't that be a dream?
Yeah.
That would be amazing. But Ghost of You, I mean, we really saw this very distinct step into, I mean, of course, the previous videos were in their own right, very narrative driven. There was definitely that cinematic element. But Ghost of You seemed like such a much bigger step into that cinematic style. And as you say, them being game to dress up, them being game to act, diving into this much more big budget, lengthy, higher art version of doing a music video. Would you say that, because if I'm not mistaken, you hadn't done any films prior to Ghost of You. So would you say that this was maybe a key moment in pushing your boundaries to prepare you for full-length filmmaking?
The process of shooting a film and a scene it is very different than music videos. Like, there's different rehearsal process and stuff like that. But it was a world building, and like I remember starting to be really aware of techniques and how versatile you could be. Like, if you're doing handheld cameras and really studying, and so much of what I was doing in music video, especially in the early times, it was just imitation. I didn't try to plagiarize, though sometimes I probably came close, stole from the masters, but but it was really like, we looked at these movies and I was like, how do I do that? And then inevitably you kind of make it your own with in your collaborations with the artists and your cinematographers and production designers and whatnot. But that did feel like, first of all, they spent more money on that video, which allowed us to create a scope and do things. And they're like, yes, they just wanted to be a visual band. And it was a really ambitious, video. And I mean, I think like Gerard was the one who wanted to do like a World War II thing. He was very sort of specific about that. And then I kind of worked through some transitions and the story, and it's more of an implied narrative than anything sort of super specific, though I think one of the band members dies, but it just gives you that kind of raw emotional power. Like you just want those moments, but it's like, it's a rock song set in World War II, but it's somehow it works, because everybody was so committed to it. But it was it's all those were a lesson, I think, more than how to tell a story, but how flexible and supple tone can be, if you have music as a guide.
And I gotta ask, Mark, coming from this whole genre of these emo videos, when you had My Chem, you had Yellow Card, you had All American Rejects, these are all somewhat in the same vein, right? But I gotta ask, how different was it going, working on these kinds of videos to the more pop oriented ones in your portfolio? So you've got Fergie, London Bridge. You've got a favorite of mine personally is Jesse McCartney's Beautiful Soul. Gotta say, I was in love with that man, with that boy at the time. So
we did that.
How different was it for you?
Well, that one I just was obsessed with Y Tu Mama Tambien, and like we kind of like referred to that maybe a little bit too closely in that video, but I mean, it was not nearly as daring. It was Jesse McCartney after all. It was a sweetheart. But that video I shot the same weekend with the same crew as Coheed and Cambria, Blood Red Summer, which is the opposite video.
Yeah.
So we hired the crews for like a 2-day shoot, and we managed to kind of work at an economy of scale, which is just and Max Goldman was my cinematographer. We just went from one place in upstate New York to the next one. And it was, I think to me, I really enjoyed bouncing between different genres and artists. And I really tried to connect to the essence of of that artist, to understand what was interesting to them and what was interesting to their audience. And I have always enjoyed that collaborative factor. And I feel very cautious about making it an expression of my own feelings or worldview. I really wanted to sort of surrender to the music and facilitate its essence, right? And obviously I have my own prejudice, my own ideas about things, but I wanted to connect to another artist, and that's what made those things fun. And like, I have my bag of tricks, and like, if I wanted to use handheld cameras or, I think I was really disciplined about creating a structure in order to so the music video would have a shape, which is interesting looking back on it. It's so fun to talk about this stuff. I have not talked about it in so long, but like, in the 90s, I watched music videos from the beginning to the end, but in the early 2000s, they would only show like a verse and a chorus, and it was so much about the close-up of the singer, and they were I always wanted more close-ups. And I was like, well, I can fight against that, or I can try to be creative within those parameters. So that was a lesson for me. And it was to find at once sort of sublimating yourself to the form, but also finding a way to make it feel fun to me and interesting to me. But and in so doing, I think you kind of create a bridge to the audience. But like Jesse was a kid, and he was a sweetheart, and he was working really hard and probably a little bit more cautious creatively, but really incredibly talented and sweet. But like, it was just, I mean, everybody had a different thing. The Pussycat Dolls a different thing than Diddy, obviously, that had a different thing than Green Day. And I enjoyed, one of my favorite experiences as a music video director was doing a video for Trey Songz, which was in Virginia, in St. Petersburg, Virginia. Trey Songz was like, I want you to come here and live with me for a week so you can see what my world is like. And it was fantastic. was such an interesting sort of experience. I mean, I don't know that I need to go back there, but it was like, I love that kind of getting access to what people were feeling, because whatever was happening, if they were making a music video, they cared really deeply about it, you know, and it came by and large from a very real place, you know, and that's true for Regina Spektor or Mike Chem or whomever.
And I love that Regina Spektor video. It came at the right time for me. It was so like with the very little shots that you presented, you told a very complete story, and I really love that. Like from being alone, like, and then that shape of a person, and the person comes, and then that the paint,
The burst of color.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah,
Well, that's a good example of structure, though. You're like, it starts off with being like, you know, I mean, you're setting up an expectation with this empty person who's just fake and not really there, but she's acting like it is. The color palette is all black and white. So I'm like, well, then you're going to want to see color. That's an evolution. It's a kind of storytelling, visually speaking.
and I also find it interesting that you shot, going back to just a bit, you shot Jesse's and Coheed and Cambio's video on the same period of time. And you know, I know a lot of filmmakers who would get whiplash from that, like would get creative conflict from having two very different videos. And they are two very different videos, right? But you seem to have no problem like switching. You enjoy that process.
Well, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but you know, I was in my 20s and I was like getting to direct music videos, and I was just like, go, go, go. It was the only thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It was so fun. And I mean, it was really challenging, but it was like, okay, I tried not to, I didn't like saying no to doing music videos. I was like, well, how can I make this interesting for me? And it didn't always work. I think there's, you know, I would say there's only a handful of videos that I really am like, I look back and I'm like, you know what? I nailed it. Most of the time, I think they were okay, sort of serviceable. And sometimes I think they were just like failures. But I wanted to exercise that muscle. I wanted to work. And that was at the company I was at, DNA, there was a real philosophy, like, don't be snotty. Like, go and you're here to work and make videos. And I think in retrospect, it gave me the confidence as a director, but just a broad swath of experience to figure out how to do something, whatever circumstances. You're just dealing with problems all the time. And so creatively, I'm like, okay, I have to go do this like very sweet pop video, and then there's zombies murdering a band the next day. And which came through, but it's like, oh, okay, I have to really understand what the visual grammar I'm developing here, you know? And it forces you to create a sort of shorthand. I think there was times in there, like, I remember there was a period, and maybe this is around that time, but I was like, I did, you know, London Bridge, I was doing Evanescence, then I flew back from London, then I was doing Evanescence, then I was doing Regina Spektor. There was a couple other ones like right in a row, just like bing, bang, boom. And it forces you to not overthink things, you know?
Yeah.
And you're at that age, talk about frontal lobes, there's a kind of creative expansion that's happening. And, you know, you got to push against what you know. You're getting your 10,000 hours, right? And like that was a really fun time, I didn't have kids. I didn't mind working like crazy. I had virtually no social life. So it was like, it wasn't social life. It was so, I really derived a lot of pleasure. Again, pleasure is a relative term, but meaning from those experiences. So like pushing myself as hard as I could was like it was fun, I guess.
And I'm assuming it gave you that advantage when you finally transitioned to film, like that flexibility in terms of creativity, that focusing on the work and the work ethic. So when you came into so what was it like finally getting into film, like with 500 Days of Summer, for example? Like,
Well,
what was the shift like?
sure. There was like, to be, because this is I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of filmmakers who are listening to this. So it's like, I'll get into some of the minutia. Like, I didn't know how to shoot a scene, and I had to really think about it. I did I did a short film actually with Olivia Wilde, believe it or not, before she
okay.
was on TV. And I was like, how do I make decisions about where to put the camera in a scene where somebody's walking down a hallway or a conversation? I didn't know about coverage in the same way. I was just like, when you're doing music videos, you're thinking so much about this shot and this shot and this shot, not so much about the character emotion and how that's evolving in a story. And so that was a much different kind of vernacular and grammar than what I had been used to. And so I really stepped back and I listened to a lot of DVD commentaries. I mean, Christopher Nolan had made a couple movies, and he's like, I put the camera at eye level, and I kind of, and he had a real philosophy about where to put the camera. And I was like, that was really helpful. And point of view was something that kept on coming up from a lot of filmmakers about like, oh, I'm gonna put the camera here, and I'm not gonna enter in the room until the character enters into the room. And there was a rule system that was really helpful for me. That was like a big transition, and really tethering the storytelling to an emotion of the character, the protagonist, which was something that was new and different for me. And in the first week or so of shooting 500, I was like, I think I got used to how it worked. But I would tell you, like, by the time I was doing 500, we was maybe 32 or something years old, but maybe a little younger. But I had I'd spend more time on set than most other directors who had done a couple movies at like, I had spent the entirety of my late 20s shooting, writing, editing, and I really knew what I could do with the camera. I really knew what the difference between a telephoto lens was and a wide angle lens. I knew about color timing. I knew about costumes, and I knew about how to use split screens in a narrative way. And like, I had really sort of developed a sort of a repertoire of tricks and to that could be gathered together in the aggregate to create an emotional, an emotion. And the language of 500 Days of Summer was on some level very simple. It was pulled from singular sort of point of view from this protagonist, but we got to use the kind of kitchen sink, like all the kind of tricks and gags in the music video world that were like the split screens, like the dance sequence. Like I had some experience and I knew how to do those, you know what I mean? I knew the timing of them. I knew how to edit it. I knew how to how music, how a pop song, the lyrics can help convey a story, So I had all that sort of bursting to get out, and it made, I think, 500 a kind of the perfect first movie.
Yeah, you just blitz through all our questions for 500 Days of Summer. It's I'm kind of at a loss now because now I need to transition.
Well, I remember there was a question you wanted to talk about, like the genesis of the dance sequence.
Yeah, the genesis of the dance sequence, because we really could see we could see all the threads that was connecting your that sequence and your music videos, and we wanted to ask how did it feel? Like, did it feel like going home back to your roots? Like, was this a conscious decision to hark back to your earlier parts of your career?
To talk about dancing, like I always felt like dancing, there's a feeling of joy that you get from dancing. It's different than comedy. It's different than anything else. And it's a way to express yourself in a really sort of interesting and specific way. And in the original version of the script, it was like a parade with like silly characters, and it was there to express it was kind of more comedy, a little bit more goofy. And I wanted it was there to express an emotion of joy, of connection, of celebration, but it was also solipsistic. It was also like sort of self-congratulatory and a little ridiculous in that way. And so I was like, I mean, Scott and Michael, the writers who I still collaborate with a lot today, like Scott brought up the Hall & Oates song as like a great pop song. And like, I was like, oh, that's great. I can build out that. But it was there because I was like, but again, in terms of storytelling, it had structure, you know, and started off with Han Solo in the reflection, and then it built slowly, piece by piece. And you're just trying to kind of create, not repeat yourself, right? Yeah. And let it get bigger and bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's an interesting thing. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is another show that I did that had a similar, which was more of a, you know, musical comedy. But they both, we tested, you test movies, and it's funny. I went back and looked at the testing report, you know, just a few weeks ago. I was reviewing these things. So I was just a bit curious. And that sequence was very controversial for the test audience. Like, a lot of people, it was very divisive. A lot of people, it was their least favorite part of the movie. And other people's were, you know, other people thought it was great. But when we took it to Sundance, I mean, you could feel it in the room. Like, everybody was laughing, and there was a total embracing of that moment. And I think it's become sort of a really memorable part of that thing. But for the test audience, it's a way to measure. It's a great demonstration of caution for test audiences. Yeah. But and same with Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which was this, I think, became one of the sort of identifying sort of visuals of that show, was her up on the pretzel, Rachel up on the pretzel. And the test audiences were like, I don't know. But the people that love it, loved it. And it really sits in your head. So that was a fun part of it. In terms of I will just monologue for a little while. You don't
Go ahead. Go right ahead. Yes. This is what we love. The music video, another thing, as I was developing 500 Days of Summer for years with with Searchlight, just waiting for that to pull the trigger, and they were very slow. But I'd always go and do storyboards or think about music. And so by the time we were actually making a movie, I had really specific touch tones for songs in the movie, like the Wolf Mother song. You know, I remember I was in Hungary shooting a video, I think for Evanescence, but maybe it was for Valeria, I don't know. And I had heard that song, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great for when he's getting back on his feet again. And there's this thump, 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 like bass drum sort of intro to the song. And I was like, oh, I can tie that with the visuals. And he's like throwing a tennis ball, and like Joe was like, this is great. Well, there's never this level of detail before we started shooting. But I was paranoid. I was like, I wanted to have everything sort of meticulously planned out before I shot that movie from an emotional perspective. And I had a couple, you know, I had the Regina Spektor song in my head. I had the all those songs, the Smiths, obviously, but were kind of worked out. And they all had some lyrical affiliation, some more direct than others, with the story that was on the screen. I will say, I don't know who said this, but I remember somebody talking about Wong Kar-wai, and they're like, he's okay with letting the music take over in a movie. And I really held that with me when I was making 500 Days of Summer. I was like, sometimes, and it's a movie about pop culture and a guy who's obsessed with pop culture, but I felt really comfortable letting the music drive the narrative, which is not, I realized in retrospect, is not something that happens as frequently as it could. Speaking of, before I forget, and Carla's going to kill me because I'm going to waste more time, because I just remember, we mentioned TV, and I was looking at your filmography, and one of your most recent TV shows is High Potential, specifically that episode about the dancer. And yeah, and that was one of my favorite episodes, actually, because I'm a fan of the show.
That's I helped a friend of mine. They wanted to do they were sort of reworking some of that stuff, and I was working at Disney at the time, and they needed a little bit of help, and so I went over. I haven't done a lot of that sort of episode. I do typically pilots or something, but it was a super fun group of people, and Todd, who was running the show, was really open to collaboration, and it was it was a fun the musical part of it was I thought was fun, but there was a kind of whimsy when you a very subjective rule system for when she was doing her calculations,
going inside her head. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It felt very subjective, and that was a fun thing. Caitlin Olsen's also a genius.
Yeah, and it was very subtle, but you were there. I could really feel how especially how you described how you build your scene and integrate music and dance and theater and even as something as subtle as that was definitely there. Now, Carla had a question about.
Yeah, sure. We kind of saw this crossover moment for you. We can't not touch on Spider-Man, right? So we kind of saw this crossover moment for you at the ever familiar and now famous Emmanuel Presbyterian Church in California. So was that a conscious wink to your music video?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, this is I think almost the last movie I shot in LA. I think it was. They don't shoot in LA very much anymore, but there are locations in Los Angeles that allow for shooting and encourage shooting. And this was one of those places. So and it has a certain architectural style, sort of Gothic feeling that was appropriate. And I was like, oh, I know where we can do this thing. And we built a spire for Spider-Man, but it was, I think they used it in Mouse Hunt. You can see it in a lot of movies. It's a Korean Presbyterian church, I believe. But
it's more a practical consideration than
very practical. Not a lot of churches that look like that in LA.
Yeah, that's true.
That will let you. So that was it had a kind of very specific set of.
It must have been a nice homecoming feeling.
It was close to my house, which was great.
Even better.
I think Carlo was looking for a more emotional gut punch connection.
I just felt like I really needed to bring back the emo.
No, that makes perfect sense.
It was a very emo scene, wasn't it? Him mourning Captain Stacy.
Yeah.
And you got that same top shot sort of the umbrellas.
And it's true. Emma
similar mood.
Yeah. Okay. I remember that. Yeah.
So while we're back on music videos, Maui has a good one on Easter eggs that we think refer specifically to you. You want to take this one, Maui?
Oh yeah. Actually, we still have some time, right? And your production
9 minutes.
Your production name is the Black Lamb, correct? Black Lamb Productions.
Yeah, that's our production.
And we kept on noticing the motif, and I'm sure you've been asked this before. There is a recurring motif especially in your earlier stuff, the white lamb. Why that? Mm-hmm. And we were even arguing earlier about fidelity. There was this picture frame. Apparently, it's not a lamb. It's horse. I thought it was horse. She thought it was a lamb.
No,
but anyway,
we had our conspiracy theory board up behind us. That's a lamb.
It came from the broad idea. There's a Thomas Pynchon book called The Crying of Lot 49. And there is a symbol in that, like a flugelhorn, that's very specific and that I had read in college. And I was like, it was very peculiar. It was very intriguing to me, what this, and they printed the symbol in the book. And it stayed with me, that idea. And I was like, oh, I should do something like that. Because in the book, the characters keep seeing it, and it creates a kind of suspense and intrigue, and it's something that's not really answered, but it just draws you in. And I found that both exhilarating and incredibly frustrating. But it was in the back of my head, and the first time I used it was in the brand new video for Sick Transit Gloria, and which is a line from, well, it's a Glory Fades, but they use it in Rushmore.
Yeah.
But I think there's a line in that song which is, I am the she is the lamb, I am the slaughter. I am the lamb, she is the slaughter. Something like that. It's very emo-y. And that I was like, oh, lamb. And then I put that on the door. I was like, oh, this is, and then because to me, it represented kind of version of innocence in a way. And then it kind of took on to a life of its own. And like people have sent me like, they've written reports on it for their college classes, which is like wild. And found meaning in it. But what I thought was interesting is people kind of like, what makes it compelling, it is the same thing for me when I was reading Thomas Pynchon. Like it forces you to kind of invest yourself and try to create a meaning for it.
Yeah.
And I think that was the exercise. I mean, that's super pretentious, but forgive me, I was in my 20s. Yeah.
And for whatever it's worth, it like the people who like Carla, for example, who were fans of emo videos, did attach their own meaning and brought very substantial
What
meaning.
did you think? What did you think it meant,
Carla?
I couldn't personally assign, I suppose, I didn't presume to assign the meaning, but I was taking it as more of like a wink into how, okay, there's some lore, there is lore connecting it all.
Lore,
and there's this inside joke or an inside secret that if you know, you know. So that was kind of how I was taking it. Wherein,
I think that's right.
Yeah, I watch so many of these that I know that white lamb, and I'm in on it. I see you. That was the way I was taking it.
Not everybody wanted it in their video. Like I did a Midway video. I don't think they wanted to put it in there, but it was like it was there. I like the kind of Twilight Zone-y thing in a video because I think you could live in a sort of slightly more ephemeral narrative space. And like that, it was to me also a cue for that, like, oh, this is going to be a video with like a little bit of weirdness in it,
I thought it was a religious
that's my dog
thing.
chiming in.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
no, not at all. Like it was more, what if it's about like the loss of innocence? I mean, lambs are about innocence and purity, and then, so it could be that.
And like they were often at thresholds, like, he's crossing into this door, he's opening up a suitcase, or, that was the idea there.
Is that why it's black lamb now? Like the complete loss of innocence?
And I think Gwen Stefani had lamb in there. I don't know. It was like, I had to come up with a title for a company, and it felt appropriate.
Okay. Well, before we let you go, since we're almost out of time, if you don't mind, you indulge us in a quick round of word association. If you had to give each of these awards to a music video of yours, what would be? There are 5 here. The first one would be toughest production.
Ooh, Incubus. Make Your Move. Like we did that in the desert, and I think like people had, you think Josh, it was terrible. It was a video for a stealth movie tie-in. It was brutal. Okay. It looked cool. It was like that was the hardest.
It really did. Personal favorites.
Okay.
I like the brand new video. I like Move Along by All American Rejects. I think that kind of clicked together, I think, in a way. Those are probably some of my favorites.
Okay.
How about You Had to Be There, the one that's most impossible to recreate in 2026?
Oh God, the most impossible to recreate. Diddy, probably.
With good reason.
With good reason. No sense.
Yeah. Good era.
Let's go with Happy Client Award, the one most loved by the artist or band.
Probably the Mike Hem stuff. They were so great. Like, after Helena, they were grateful and cool and really gracious during that process. Like I remember, like they actually wrote me a check after the success of it, which just didn't happen. But they're like, you did this for very little money, and like you want you to share in the
nice
the benefits.
That's amazing.
From it. A really super nice thing, and like, but that Warner Brothers of that era was like they were so fun to work with. And yeah, but it was Green Day was great too. They were like they're like, yeah, man, whatever. They were just like there and having a good time. You know, so different thing.
Go for
So,
it.
okay,
Sure.
you're the guy who, like the one you still hear the most about?
Oh, Helena, My Chemical Romance, like 100%. They are
Okay.
like those videos like have lived on in a way that is, I think, kind
Like
of
obviously,
amazing.
like looking at Carla. I mean, hello.
So there
And
you
that
go.
picture,
Yeah, so product.
bringing that
product.
picture up again. Okay. And what's the last one, Carla?
Oh, okay. Let's end this on a sentimental note. What's the one you would do all over again in a heartbeat?
You know, I did a video for POD where we went around the world with my friends, Guy and Jonathan, my DP, and we went around the world and we shot we didn't shoot in the Philippines, but in China, in Australia, in Berlin, in Russia, and it was a very hard shoot, but it was really memorable, and it was a little bit of a fantasy. Like I got to live out, like I get to travel around the world in about 2 weeks and shoot different people from different cultures holding up lyrics to the song. And it was really, I loved that. And it was a completely magical experience and I met a lot of really interesting people from around the world, you know, and it was really, really a fun experience that I don't think I'll ever get to have again.
Well, never say never, eh?
Yeah, I never know. But thank you guys. Listen, I love what
Thank
you're doing
you.
on I think music videos. Like, it's funny, like you saw it. I was like, or you were making those videos, and I just was. I love it. I know so much about music videos, and I've just have seen so many, and I feel like my friends who've made them they're all making movies now, but it doesn't exist in the same way that it used to. And
Yeah, it really doesn't.
I missed that. I missed that time. It was a really fun time to be sort of coming up as a filmmaker. So I appreciate the kind of the cred and the light shown on it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And you know, if we could have you on again
It's
and like
our
we could
honor
talk
to
about
have you,
more,
Mark.
we could talk to you some more. That would be awesome.
Anytime. All right.
But
Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you
gotta
so
bounce.
much. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. That was a packed 1 hour. What you think, Carla?
Yeah, I covered a lot of ground, definitely. And my emo heart is very happy.
And you know, my filmmaking brain is full. Now, on that note, we would like to thank everyone for listening in. We don't have the next episode yet, but we're busy. We're really busy trying to find that next, you know, special guest to interview.
And if you're watching this on a reel, we're happy to take any suggestions, or if you can tag your favorite music video directors or producers or artists, help us out. Why not?
Yeah, that would be awesome. You know, if like somebody would pop up, like Mark just messaged me, and that's why he came up.
Amazing.
You know, and so I mean, I am no Hollywood agent. You know, I have no connection. So it's really just because of the community that we are here right now, and I'm very, very thankful to everyone.
On that note, it is time to wrap up, but there's definitely more on the way. Make sure you tune in for more music video breakdowns at The Music Video Guy on Instagram and TikTok.
I am Maui, the music video guy.
And I'm Carla, your resident girl at The Rock Show. We'll catch you next time.
So be sure to follow us for more podcasts and music video breakdowns. Bye.
See you next time.
You have been watching MT.
You're listening to the Music Video Guy Podcast.